I'm really pleased to welcome tonight Lisa Crosse and Larry Bragman, candidates for MMWD, the Marin Water District 3rd Division seat for the Marin Water Board. So Lisa writes that she fell in love with water and watery places as a little girl playing in Lagunitas Creek and completed her high school and college years in Australia. In addition to her work at the Board of Supervisor as an aide, Lisa has worked on diverse nonprofits in the environmental arena and served on 2 committees of the Marin Municipal Water District, one on fisheries and the other on water rates. In 2012, she was appointed by Steve Kinsey to the MMWD Board of Directors to fill the seat of David Behar. Did I say his name right? Behar?
You did, although I'll make one correction.
Yes.
I was appointed by the Board of Directors of the Marin Municipal Water District.
Yes, okay. Good. So why don't you go ahead with your opening comments, and then I'll read your intro after you've finished your opening comments. 8 to 10 minutes, and I will set the timer so you will hear the timer.
Firstly, thank you all very much for the opportunity to be with you, and thank you, Susan, for setting it all up. I was blessed to be a little girl in Marin County, as Susan said, and I did truly have one of those moments in childhood where I fell in love with the creek, wandering around in the creek, and that passion has stayed with me all of my life. In Australia, I fell in love with the marine environment. When I returned here to the United States, I married a man who was a fly fisherman, and he introduced me to the rivers of California. And that passion has stayed with me into my working life. And I was fortunate to be appointed by the Board of Supervisors to the first Fisheries Committee. That was really the first time in my life that I got to start to actually give back to the community and care for the resources that I love. And I learned a lot on that committee about fish, about the watershed, about the water district. And it became a point of empowerment for me to serve on a series of different organizations. Some were nonprofits, but I was also appointed to the Cordell Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council, and then served on a nonprofit supporting that council. And it was really the empowerment of that experience, though, that led me to want to go out and be more useful to the community and the resources that I cared about. I did actually think about running for the seat about 8 years ago, and decided not to at that time because I still had kids at home, elderly mother with health issues. And when David Behar stepped up, I applauded and supported him. David in turn appointed me to the Water Rates Committee, so I began to learn about the district from a whole different perspective, basically the financial side of the district. And I felt that I had by that point a great breadth of knowledge about the resources, the water supply, the organization itself. And I actually, it almost sounds funny, started to feel an affection for the organization itself and to really care for the well-being of the organization. And so when David stepped down, he encouraged me to apply, and I was appointed unanimously by the Water District Board from a group of 14 people, a range of attorneys, and even a UC Berkeley professor, so I felt very honored to be appointed. And I think they selected me because of the fact that they knew me from my committee work, but also because of a quality that I consciously strive for, and that is to be a person who resolves problems. When there are differing opinions in the room, I try to help find solutions and common ground. And I think they had seen that and appreciated it in the service on the board. In the time I've served on the board, nearly 20 months, I've found the district to generally be in very good shape financially. We've recovered from the recession. We're doing a super job of taking care of infrastructure. I was really pleased to note that in your mission and objectives, you emphasize infrastructure to serve the community. That's an area I think that many people take for granted. But the reality is that even though it's the oldest water district in California, and we do still have some very old pipe, we're doing a good job of basically every year knocking it off a certain miles of pipeline, tanks, treatment plants, and so on. And we have a good team of staff, and I would say the board itself is a pretty healthy organization. Looking forward, there are some key issues that I am concerned about for the district. Number one on the list is making sure that we are well prepared for drought. That's really my highest priority. And I'm pleased to say that we're making some good progress on some, I guess what I would call the low-hanging fruit, the things that are easy to be excited about, and that is number one, conservation. We have a very robust program, have a tradition of strong programs. We have kind of the traditional toilet and washing machine rebates. We also have a new multifaceted rebate program that will support more innovative approaches, including gray water, water catchment, swimming pool covers. And then soon we're working on a cash for grass program to help people change out inefficient landscaping. And I like to help people, make that change. We also have some very exciting recycled water projects underway, 4 different projects in the works, ranging from the nearest to be completed would be the Peacock Gap Golf Course. We're currently in the process of financing it. Basically have a timeline for construction. That will basically provide recycled water for the greens of the golf course, provide about 270 acre-feet of water, which is something like 700, 800 homes worth of water in a year. And then we have a series of studies with the sanitation agencies, Central Marin and Mill Valley, to try and provide recycled water to playing fields in those communities as well as commercial landscaping. So those are projects I get really excited about. I'm also very interested in studying options for other water supply in the spirit of basically leaving no stone unturned. Because it's important to remember that even though we're in a non-emergency year this year, in January, before that one miraculous storm, we were looking at 14 months of water. And if we hadn't had that one storm, think where we'd be right now. We would be in a really bad way. And I think we have to do better as a district in the future to be prepared for multi-year droughts. I would also say I have a great concern as well as personal passion about the condition of the watershed, the Mount Tamalpais watershed, where we have about 20,000 acres of land, and all of us love it and enjoy it as recreational land, but it's important to manage it for water supply as well. Number one concern there is the problem of a buildup of vegetation resulting from years of disrupting the natural fire cycle, and an extreme problem with invasive weeds, notably Scotch and French broom, which are a fire hazard in themselves. I have great concern about the fire hazard. It's basically a bomb waiting to go off up there, and I'm not being over dramatic. I also feel that we are watching a biological disaster unfold in front of our eyes, and we have to do better. The district has a draft plan to address the vegetation issues, lays out 2 main alternatives, one all manual, one which is an integrated pesticide management approach. We have an EIR, or environmental impact report, underway. Results are due in late spring or early summer of next year. And then we're going to have a deep public process. And I am very interested in understanding not only the facts and the science from the EIR, but I will be really interested in knowing what the communities that are most directly affected have to say about the results of the EIR and the plan. We'll weigh the merits, we'll make a decision, and we will go forward because the status quo is not acceptable. Lastly, I would say that I'm very concerned about the financial well-being of the district and making sure that rates are fair and that it's well managed. As I said earlier, the news is good, but we will be looking at our rate structure going forward. Rates need to be directly associated with the actual cost of producing water. So those are kind of my main areas of priority. I would say that I've enjoyed the challenge of a campaign. I've been very excited by the process and grateful for support of wonderful people who have stepped up to help me. I did bring a little bit of literature, a very simple bit of literature along, and I'm blessed to have some terrific endorsements along the way. So I think I'm under 8 minutes there.
You are under 8 minutes,
Excellent.
yes.
Okay,
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the opening
Right.
comments.
My
And so
pleasure.
hold your questions, and then there'll be a chance for questions after we hear from Larry. Larry has served 11 years on the Fairfax Town Council, including 2 terms as mayor. He's tried to provide respectful and innovative leadership and also served on the boards of Marin Clean Energy Authority, the Marin Telecommunications Authority, the Ross Valley Paramedic Authority, and the Community Media Center of Marin. So with that, to you, Larry.
Thanks a lot. I also practice a little bit of law on the side. So I've been doing that for 30 years, which I think is going to come in handy if I do get elected to the board. As Susan said, I've been on the Fairfax Town Council for 11 years. And I would say, excuse me, I was baptized in watershed policy the year within 6 months of being elected, when my now wife was running in the watershed and observed district staff in hazmat suits spraying pesticides in the watershed. And within a few weeks of that incident, the Fairfax Town Council, under Frank's leadership, passed a resolution urging the district to stop spraying herbicides and pesticides in the watershed. And it's been 10 years now since that happened, and $1 million later, and the district is still trying to decide if herbicides and pesticides are safe in our drinking water watershed. Beyond that, as I've gone through my service in Fairfax, housing, economy, growth, all of those topics are tied with water, because without water we don't have any of it. So water in the water district is really ground zero as far as the future of our community. There is no more important place for me to be. There are no more important decisions for our community to make than the decisions that this water district is going to make in the next few years. We are now facing in California and Marin County drought and climate change. We've got twin challenges that lay ahead. And I believe that we've got to change the way the Waterboard does business in order to meet those challenges. And I think we need new leadership. I think we need independent leadership to make the changes that are necessary to bring this district up to the next level. The district has done some good work in the last few years with conservation, but we're facing an urgent situation. I disagree. Lisa and I agree that we're facing a crisis, but we disagree how to handle it. I don't think right now we can sit back on our laurels in Marin, because even though our reservoirs here in Marin are at 92% of normal, that actually is only 66% of full. And if you only look at your analysis by looking at the watershed and the reservoirs, you're really not seeing the big picture, because we get 25% of our water from Sonoma County. And Sonoma County, our partners in Sonoma County are really, really hurting. 2 weeks ago, Sonoma County Water Agency got an emergency order from the State Water Agency to draw down the Russian River. So we are in a water emergency if you look at the big picture. And in all fairness to our partners in Sonoma and the Russian and Eel River that we're drawing water from, we need to step up our game here in Marin. We need to build a local watershed economy, an economy that's based on enhanced watershed maintenance, on enhanced reservoir maintenance and repair, on enhanced efficiency, conservation, and innovation. We can't sit back. We can't pat ourselves on the back. It can't be business as usual, because the one thing I can tell you is our future, our water future, is very uncertain. We don't know whether the drought will last another month, another year. We could have weather patterns that completely confound us. We could have an exceptional large amount of precipitation that comes because as the climate warms, we could be getting tropical storms that dump up in the north coast that we're not even used to. So nobody can say what the future will hold. But the one thing I truly believe is that we can strengthen our water supply and strengthen our community and strengthen our economy by basing our water policy as we go forward on local watershed enhancement, on a local watershed economy, so that our growth and our development, it has some organic tie to the place we call Marin, so that we don't become completely detached from our environment. I mean, that's California dreaming, just to say we're going to build X amount of houses and then we're going to go find the water. That is 19th century. I'll even say 20th century. And we're finding that out now. It doesn't work. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul. So my belief, and I think where Ms. Crosse and I differ, is I really think we've got to invest in our watershed. We've got to invest in our infrastructure, private and public. We've got to change building codes so that high efficiency toilets, high efficiency domestic appliances are the order of the day. That it's not something special that happens every once in a while when something wears out in the house. That every time there's new construction, every time there's a major remodel, that we require, or let's say encourage, the property owners to change out those appliances and to go to the next level of efficiency. That's a very painless way to produce water at a much lower marginal cost than going out and searching for new sources of water, which ultimately are very uncertain, both in availability and quality. I mean, I think these are all tasks that the Water District needs to be leading on and setting an example. The Water District should be promulgating model ordinances for local jurisdictions to adopt. That's the kind of leadership I would bring to this job. Fairfax, I don't know if there's any other jurisdiction that requires change out of toilets when properties are sold. But 600 properties in the Ross Valley change hands every year. Just think if we changed from conventional toilets to high efficiency dual flush toilets, we would be changing out 600 properties a year every year. And you can do the math about how much drinking water we would save by doing that simple step. So there's a lot we can do without changing the lifestyle and the economic prosperity that's really marked Marin County as a special place, and without losing our character as a county. Water's a human right. It's essential for all life. But in spite of how precious a resource it is, we all waste water. We flush our toilets with drinking water here in Marin. A third of our water is used for landscaping. We do need to encourage high efficiency landscaping. Jurisdictions are authorizing landscape plans that are lavish and wasteful. And that's got to change. That's not to mean we're going to be living in sand. It's going to mean that our aesthetics and our practices are going to adapt to the environment. So that's not a step back, that's a step forward. And that's a step that will, again, that's going to integrate us into this place we call Marin. And it's going to further tie us to the character of Marin, which I think we all really have so much emotional and economic stake in seeing that it continues the way that we're used to seeing it, the way that we've lived. I don't think when we have a record of wasting water, that the way to deal with that is to go out and find more water to waste. The way to deal with that type of practice is to stop wasting water. And I think there's a difference between Ms. Crosse and I in that regard too, because the district is now pursuing an intertie with East Bay Mud. This is a $45 million project. It's a pipeline over the Richmond Bridge to connect up with East Bay Mud. It's going to either go to the Delta or it's going to go to a desal plant. So I guess I'll get to talk to you about that further.
All right, well, thank you both for some excellent opening comments. I mean, what you'll learn is that this is a really smart group, and I'm sure they've come with lots of questions.
Right.
So we're going to take the next 30 minutes or so for questions from this audience. And I would just ask that you give your name so they know who's asking the questions. And I will moderate, trying to just point out who's going to be the next 2 or 3 question askers. So if you have a question, we'll go Richard, Judy, and then Clayton. And then
I have a trifold question. First of all, I'd like to understand that you're familiar with global weirding. Don't answer. It was a 2012 BBC Horizon documentary, and it basically explained how in Europe they are bracing for extreme climate fluctuations. This is what we should be expecting and planning for. The fluctuations will be much greater than ever before. So therefore, I'd like to understand, my first part of my question is, shouldn't we be building a bigger buffer? Second part of my question is, can you tell me where exactly and in which documents are the 24,010 housing units that are planned in Sonoma's priority development areas? Where are they referenced and anticipated in part of the growth plan? Because those will surely, since we use 25% of the same water supply, impact those. And if they aren't referenced, why the hell not? Thirdly, to Lisa, I think the direct question all of us have to have on our minds here is, you are directly paid and you serve Supervisor Kinsey. You are more or less his employee. There is a boss-subordinate relationship there. If you continue to serve on the board, and Supervisor Kinsey has demonstrated his intent supporting growth 5 times even beyond what ABAG would like to see in this county, why should we believe you aren't continuing to serve Supervisor Kinsey rather than us as residents?
Okay, so I will just ask that others, as you ask questions, that if we can keep the questions really concise. Those are great questions. Larry, do you want to go first with tackling them, and what do you want to have?
Let me talk about climate change and building a buffer. One of the planks in my platform is called the Watershed Stewardship Initiative. The district has spent probably close to $1 million studying using herbicides in the watershed, and that is not going to enhance the watershed. It's not going to reduce the fire load in the watershed, and it's certainly not going to help build a bigger buffer in the watershed and make a healthier watershed. What we need to do is adopt pretty straightforward plan where we hire crews of people, give them a living wage, and have a field biologist supervising them and getting them out into the watershed and having them clear brush, clear the invasive vegetation, clear the low-hanging canopy, ladder up some of the canopy, so that we are reducing the vegetation load in the watershed. That's going to make for a healthier watershed. It's going to make for a healthier environment in the watershed. It's also going to increase the yield in the watershed. The studies have shown that when you adopt those type of practices, they've been adopted in the Feather River area and in South Africa. South Africa's had enhanced watershed maintenance for many, many years. And the studies have shown in those areas that when we adopt those kind of forward-thinking conservation and maintenance methods, that in some instances, for every 10 acres that we clear, we gain an acre-foot of water. So I think that it's time to stop studying toxic herbicides, to groom the watershed, and get to work. So I think that would increase the buffers that you were talking about as far as climate change is concerned. And I think, nobody who's really looked into it or talked to people that are knowledgeable can say it's anything but unpredictable. Our weather patterns may get very, very unpredictable. There may be more precipitation. We may have drought interspersed with heavy storms that the likes of which we've never seen. As far as what's happening in Sonoma, we've got a real problem. Okay, Lake Sonoma right now, or rather Lake Mendocino right now, is at its lowest level that it's ever been. It's at a level comparable to where it was in 1977. So Lake Sonoma is really hurting. State Water Agency just gave the Sonoma County Water Agency an emergency order to increase the draw in the Russian River. Lake Sonoma is a different story. Lake Sonoma is not up to snuff. It is below normal, but it's a much bigger reservoir. Now, as far as the last numbers I saw in Lake Sonoma, it's got 169,000 acre-feet in it. I've heard from officials familiar with their needs, that's 2 years. Is that going to be sufficient for another 25,000 housing units in Sonoma? I don't think so.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was 3 minutes that I
Sorry.
set the timer. No, that's fine. So just to say, I'm setting the timer again for 3 minutes, for as much of that time as you'd like to take.
I don't know if Larry's read the watershed management plan, but it does address the type of watershed management that you were describing. Yes, it analyzes the option of pesticides as a small aspect of one element of its plan, but it also analyzes the opportunity for comprehensive watershed management for the health of the habitat that exists on the watershed, as well as related to the productivity of water supply. It's being done. We have an EIR underway, as I mentioned, and a public process next year that will weigh those two alternatives. The district is painfully aware of the variabilities of climate change. We're very clear that the one piece of information that appears to be factual is that the extremes will be more extreme. And we must be better prepared, not only taking the conservation and watershed management steps that are already underway, but keeping every possible option open, including potentially new supply. Regarding the Russian River, it's important to remember that we have a contract through 2054 guaranteed for water. The district, the Sonoma County Water Agency, has at least 2 years of supply on hand. Doesn't mean they're not in a serious situation, but it's not a crisis as it relates to Marin County. We have a guarantee of water from the Russian River. It's possible in an extreme drought that they would cut by a percentage, but remember also that our total supply ranges between 20 and 25% a year from the Russian River. As it relates to my relationship, I appreciate you getting that out on the table. I can address that in a few different ways. One is that when I was appointed, I did have a conversation with Supervisor Kinsey about that relationship that I would have with the water district, and we are both very clear about the distinct roles. And in fact, the busyness of life at the Civic Center is so intense that, I'm working on issues that don't relate to water supply at all the time, from agriculture to broadband to basically running the office. I don't particularly staff him on planning matters in any great depth because he has a whole department of people who do that. And I would say that we have a conscious relationship that provides for that delineation. Also, there has been some question about conflict of interest, and that has been defined through a consultation with the Fair Political Practices Commission, which has clarified that there is not a conflict of interest unless there is a contract between the two entities that involves basically financial or economic benefit. And in the since 2000, that kind of circumstance has only come up once. So in nearly 15 years, one time, basically a property sale from one agency to the other. So I feel personally myself that that concern has been addressed. And if anything, my relationship with the county is useful because I have a good depth of understanding about the functions of local government. I think that kind of covers it.
Thank you. Judy, you had the next question.
I did. I have a three-part question, too. The first question is to both candidates, and thank you both for being here. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
First one is your stand on fluoride in the MMWD water. And the second one's just for Lisa, the water rate study. I know that there was a minority report as well as the majority report, and I was wondering if you bring together two disparates, why there were two ones rather than one, and which side you came down on that. And also Peacock Gap, I'd like you to just clarify which is the sewer agency you're getting the water from for that?
Yeah, okay.
You can answer that one first, because that's a self-serving question on the Los Angeles Valley Sanitary District Board. I noticed you mentioned Central Marin, you mentioned Mill Valley, you didn't mention us. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'm hurt.
Las Colinas is a great partner to us along the way. It's
want to get those jigs and chops in there.
yeah, absolutely, yes. We have a long-standing and excellent relationship with Las Colinas Sanitary District. Thank you very much. Let's see, to back up. On fluoride, the district is very constrained as it relates to fluoride. First of all, we have two votes of the people that happened in the 1970s. In 1972, there was an initiative which was passed by 52% of the voters saying we want fluoride. It was followed in 1978 by a vote of the people at 58% affirming that people wanted fluoride. And then in 1995, there was a state law that was passed that said that districts over 10,000 customers, hookups, are obliged to fluoridate. So the district has been fluoridating since 1970. We have heard from a number of community advocates about concern about fluoride, and they have moved me to think that if I had a magic wand and could overcome the laws of the past, to think that I would rather not fluoridate the water, but I am very clear that we are obligated by law to fluoridate. So if there is an initiative that is brought forward on fluoride and the voters of Marin overturn the previous votes, I would be prepared to work with community members to try and get our state legislators to make at least an exemption for Marin. The reality is the legislature would be under tremendous pressure from the public health world because the American Medical Association, Dental Association, a whole slew of medical organizations would be pushing hard back on the legislature. So it's a considerable battle ahead. For the short term, though, I support the legal requirements of continuing to fluoridate water. And then, let's see, the second question
was the water rate study.
Oh, water rate study, yeah. Water rate study. That was an incredibly challenging process, so complex and convoluted. At the time in the study, we were weighing the tiered structure, similar to what we have now, potentially combined with a watershed fee, against the minority discussion, as it was described, to create water budgets for individual homes. I supported at the time the idea of our tiered structure combined with a watershed fee because of the strong conservation signal that's sustained in the tier structure, and because it was explained to us by staff that water budgets are expensive and difficult to implement fairly. My thinking on water budgets is continuing to evolve as I learn more, but the objection of staff at the time is that a water budget is basically where you go to a neighborhood and say, you live in a hot place, you have 4 people or 6 people or 2 people in your house, and your lot size is X size, therefore you get an allotment or a budget for your house, and then if you go above it or below that amount, if you're above it, you're charged more, and so on. Staff have always indicated that that's a difficult undertaking and it's costly to implement. But a recent example at the Valley of the Moon is very interesting to me because they are combining a water budget with a type of automated metering where people know what they're using every day if they choose, or they can get the information weekly. So this is a very interesting and exciting pilot project, information that's new to us since we did the water rate study. So that's kind of a short version of where that committee landed, why there was a division, but also, to my mind, it's an ongoing discussion. We do have at the district a consultant right now that is re-examining the outcome of that committee and looking at some other examples of tiered structures, and we'll also be looking at a water budget structure for us to consider.
All right, let's go on to the next question. So I know there's lots of questions, so thank you. And
Did
I'm going to
Larry
continue.
answer?
Oh,
And yes, your time. Yes, you get time to answer.
Okay. I'll start with the fluoride because I'm a little bit more familiar with that issue than the water rate issue, honestly. I think the science has caught up with the politics of fluoride. There's a recent study that came out in the Lancet, British Lancet Neurology, peer-reviewed study that found that fluoride is actually a neurotoxin and is not something to be taken lightly. So the science that's been developing in the last few years has really caught up with the politics of fluoride. And so have consumer products. There's an amazing amount of availability of fluoride in the market that consumers can choose or not choose according to their own decision. So I think fluoride should be a personal decision. I don't think that the water district should be fluoridating. I think the district probably has more discretion than it's letting on. As far as I can tell right now, the district is over-fluoridating its water. The actual fluoride levels, recommended fluoride levels, are recommended by the federal government, Health and Human Services. And according to those standards, Marin Municipal Water District is over-fluoridating by about 25%. So for starters, I think the district should reduce its fluoride rate consistent with federal standards. I think the district should consider a moratorium on fluoride until it studies it. Fluoride, we know, or we have pretty good science indicating there's some real serious human health impacts for fluoride. It shouldn't be used by nursing mothers, shouldn't be used to mix baby formula. So I think the district should consider a moratorium until it studies fluoride. The district actually is not required to fluoridate water. The state law that the district staff cited to the board is incorrect. That law has been changed since the I'm not sure why the district cited the statute that it did. That statute was repealed and replaced by a new statute. Healdsburg is now taking up fluoride. City of Portland just voted out fluoride. So fluoride is an issue. It shouldn't just be shrugged off. As far as the water rates are concerned, I'm not as familiar with water rates as Ms. Crosse is. I do think we need to build in watershed enhancement. Watershed stewardship should be built in as a fixed cost in our water bill. We shouldn't be cutting conservation or watershed stewardship when we don't sell enough water. The district needs to go from being a commodity-based business model to a public benefits model. Valley of the Moon is using wireless smart meters to monitor water use. And I don't think that's going to be a very popular idea here in Marin County, and that's the model that Ms. Crosse is referring to.
Thank you. Clayton, you're next, and then Ann, you'll be after Clayton, and then Steve.
One of the things that comes up, and this goes back to what Richard was talking about and also what you were talking about. A couple of weeks ago I was talking to the mayor of Santa Rosa about this issue concerning the water supplies coming out of Lake Sonoma and our allocation to Marin MMWD. And he, in his initial response, seemed to be rather confused about the fact even that MMWD was getting water from Lake Sonoma. And of course, I had to remind him of the process, so finally caught up with the fact that, in fact, oh yes, we are. And
so to get to your question,
what the question I'm getting to is also the fact, and to confirm what Richard was saying, that their general plan up there is planning for 100,000 more people in Sonoma County over the next 20 years. This is a substantial increase in demand. So what I get is that there is some miscommunication going on. We are led to believe we have these reserves. We may not have these reserves. We may not have them much longer, particularly in light of this. So the question I have about that is the contracting issue, the security of those reserves, and the fact that there seems to be a lack of communication between the two agencies. We have it needs, and the other thing had to do with the issue of volatility of weather. And I'd like to urge you to link up with Lynn Ingram at the University of California and her work on this issue, because she is the foremost authority on water issues in the state of California. And I think she's a person we need to get involved in this issue here in our district. So would you invite her to a colloquium for
So
Marin?
the question is
allow-
about contracting and security of
Contract
stormwater.
security and getting someone over here who's neutral scientist to
Larry,
talk
if
to
you
the
want to
community.
go first in responding to
Okay.
Clayton.
I'll try to go first. I mean, I think what you're talking about, okay, is that is the basic conflict in California water planning. You've got boards of supervisors that are making plans for development that are completely detached from the watershed that they depend on. That's California dreaming. And that's where the conflict is going to lie between the Board of Supervisors and this water board. And you need independent leadership on the water board that's unencumbered by those relationships. So, I mean, there's no denying, you know, Sonoma is go-go. They want to develop, that is their mantra up there. And so, yeah, there's a conflict between those type of ambitions and a water supply which is very precious and very limited and very uncertain. And it's the same thing down here. I mean, why are we planning for hundreds of units and not calculating where we're going to get the water from? That being said, I do believe that we can build a safe, local, abundant water supply if we invest the money into our watershed economy. This board is looking at spending $45 million at putting a pipeline over the Richmond Bridge to where? To a desal plant? To the California Water Project? The State Water Board has called the Delta a decimated environment, a decimated environment. I believe if we invest that kind of money, we're going to have the short straw when it comes time in a drought to get that water. And I think before we look at putting that kind of money into that kind of project, we've got to look at what that money would do within our watershed, what we could do with that money to build in efficiency into our domestic building economy, what we could do with enhanced watershed maintenance here in Marin. We've got the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit is right here in our community, and that's where we should be investing it. That will garner us a safe, abundant, and healthy water supply.
Thank you. Lisa?
Very good. It's important to note that the water agencies, including Sonoma, all California water agencies are obliged to create an urban water management plan. And they have to basically state very clearly how they will provide the water for the development that's called for by the cities and the counties. And so Sonoma County has already provided that information in their current urban water management plan for how they will serve Marin County as well as their other contractors and the needs of those contractors and the development that's prescribed by those cities. And Marin County is assured of its portion through the contract. That has been made clear in those plans as well as under contract. We ourselves have our own urban water management plan, which lays out the water supply needs for the next 20 years, including the proposed level of development that's anticipated for the next 20 years. And we know that the amount of demand, because we are being so good with our recycling, will actually go down very slightly over the next 20 years because of our efficiency measures in recycling. Just a little tiny bit, it goes down. At the same time, we're actually creating at a modest level new supply. And we end up with actually a slight net benefit over 20 years. And that is possible because of a combination of our good planning, but also the relatively low rate of growth in Marin County. And when you look at the historic pattern of growth, you see Marin County's traditional 1%, flattening off even more going forward. The water supply, the water demand has actually stayed pretty flat, and it's because we have increasingly been efficient. And so while I have sympathy and concern for the communities that are struggling with the potential for development in concentrated areas that has impact on community character, water supply is not the battlegrounds for development. The exception, I think, is that if the communities, the cities and the counties, go above and beyond what they are describing in their general plans, we have the ability through a state law that allows us then to basically call on those cities and counties, okay, you're calling for development over 500 units. And this is what we did in Larkspur. We said, you are going above and beyond your own community plans. You need to identify how much water you need, and you need to find a way to actually provide that water, working in partnership with the district. So that's the one piece of muscle that we have. Otherwise, by state law, we are obliged to serve the water that's being called for by the cities and the counties. That's very clear. In terms of drought going forward, what I would add is that if there is a real water emergency, and the definition of emergency is very clearly laid out in relation to the amount of water supply on hand, we can declare a moratorium, and I would not hesitate to do that in a water emergency.
Thank you. So Anne, and then Stephen, and then Susan, and then Carrie. We still have time.
It's truly unfortunate that the water district, according to Mr. Kumar, has no idea what our watershed will support in terms of population. But in light of the fact that since in the past the Richmond Bridge pipeline in the drought of '77, we've increased our water supply by over 26,000 acre-feet. We created the Suahui Reservoir in '79, and we doubled Kent in '82. And actually, in light of the fact that Kent alone could provide a whole year of our water supply, in light of the fact that we didn't even use our reservoirs for 17 and 20 years respectively, and in light of the fact that the conservation measures with the rebates have really only fairly recently been resumed, and conservation has become so successful, based on the fact that people really do want to live within their watershed and not create new water or new demand. I'm wondering why, in light of those facts, it is stated in the MMWD newsletter and in the Marin County Housing Element, in the Bay Area Regional Partnership, that you've been part of the decision to reconsider the expensive interties with a pipeline across the Richmond Bridge, which could only bring us water transfers from sources already overdrawn, or regional desal, which is highly energy consumptive and potentially hazardous to our health with contaminants of emergent concern that are untested and unregulated. I really don't understand how you could be leading the way in that direction. And maybe Larry has some comments, you've already spoken to it a bit, in regard to the fact that we have better alternatives if we live within our watershed in a sustainable manner.
Thank you. So, Lisa, it's your turn to go first. Okay.
You know, I think what I would simply say is that I want to look at all options. I think Larry has kind of overstated where the district is in terms of this pipeline discussion. Basically, right now, it's a twinkle in the eye of some engineers. I welcome the idea of studying the option because I want to know if there's any possibility. But we have not even begun the study. So it's really gone no further than one conversation with Caltrans. So that is where that project is right now. But as I said, I support looking at every possible option. Obviously, any option would have the full vetting of an environmental impact report and a community discussion, as well as an investigation about the feasibility. So my point is, keep our options open.
Well,
You've been there, done that.
I think it's a $300,000 twinkle in the eye because that's the amount of the contract that the district was set to approve at its May meeting. So it's a little bit more than a twinkle in the eye. There was a feasibility study contract before the board in May. Board member Gibson actually moved to table it. Ms. Crosse moved for public discussion of it. So it's gone well beyond that, and the regional powers that be have certainly gone well beyond that. There's been massive amounts of study of putting in a regional desal plant in East Contra Costa County. They've looked at all the sites and they've decided they want to put it in Antioch. So, I mean, it's gone well beyond the twinkle in the eye stage. It's gone to serious money stage, including the board's consideration of a $300,000 no-bid contract to do a feasibility study. Where I disagree with the board and with Ms. Crosse is the scope of the feasibility study itself, which is more of a plumbing study than a real feasibility study. We know mechanically we can bring water across the bridge. We did it in 1977. Things haven't gone that bad since then. We know how to do that. But what the real feasibility is the water going to be there? What's the quality of the water that we're going to get? Are we going to be indebted for drawing out of the delta and further decimating the delta environment? Are we going to draw that from that desal plant? Are we going to do an end around measure S and measure T by building the pipeline? And the pipeline's going to go both ways. An intertie by its very nature goes both ways. That may change the calculus of building a desal plant here in Marin. Maybe we have a water abundant year, East Bay doesn't. Do we ship water over the intertie to the East Bay? It's an interesting thing to consider. Do you think our friends in Sonoma County are going to want us to be shipping Russian River water over the Richmond Bridge? I don't think so. One other point, 1977, total amount of acre feet that was shipped over the Richmond pipeline was 4,500 acre feet. At the low bid estimate of $45 million, that's $10,000 an acre foot. That's some expensive water.
Okay, so our time is going really quickly, so I'm going to ask if you can ask your question in 1 minute and then set the timer for 2-minute responses. So Stephen, we're to you, then Susan, and then Carrie, and then I think we're going to be out of time. But
Okay.
let's see.
Lori?
Oh, and Lori.
Yes.
Were you on the
that's
list
right,
here?
I was.
I'm so sorry.
My hand was on the slide.
Okay, so we'll go Stephen, and then we'll put you in next, Lori.
Okay, I'll be real quick. First of all, I want to thank you both for coming. I learned something tonight about watershed management that I didn't know. I'm glad you're doing that. I heard about watershed management and conservation. Those are two great areas where we can increase our supply. But what I didn't hear is supply. And I want you to address two things. One is increasing the reservoir capacity in Marin. And then the other thing is groundwater replenishment, that is turning black water, toilet water into drinking water. They do it in Singapore, they do it, they're starting to do it in Orange County. I know it's the thing about, you know, and it really seems like a magic bullet because you take care of sewer water and water in the same thing, and you have unlimited growth, it sounds like. So could you both address these two issues, capacity and black water.
Let's see,
Yeah.
Larry,
I go
it's your turn
first.
to go first. 2 minutes.
Okay. As far as reservoir capacity, the district has not done a bathymetric study of the reservoirs. They just let a contract about 2 months ago to do a bathymetric study of Bontempi. They haven't done it for any of the other reservoirs. So we need to do that. We need, I think, between Alpine, Bontempi, Phoenix, Lagunitas, those all need to be surveyed without delay. District's known about this for 5 years, since Mario Gelati was screaming about it when they were trying to build a desal plant in 2009. So this is long overdue. The district did let a contract in May to do a study of Bontempi, but it's way overdue on all of them. Whether it could become practical to actually dredge them, I don't know. But we sure need to look into it because it hasn't been done in 100 years. As far as black water, gray water, we have a huge opportunity with San Quentin. San Quentin's the biggest single water user in Marin County. There's 3,000 toilets being flushed at San Quentin. To its credit, the district has applied for grant funding to study the feasibility of that project. I think that's a very feasible project. To use the water from CMSA, double plumb San Quentin, you know, plumb those toilets, high efficiency toilets, with recovered water from CMSA. I don't think we need to use black water for drinking water. We surely can use it for secondary domestic purposes, flushing toilets and irrigation. And that's a huge opportunity that's just waiting to be seized. So it's there, and you know, again, it's like, how long does it take to move? We need to move. We need to step up because it's very unpredictable. Time is not necessarily on our side.
Okay, great. To you, Lisa.
Well, I'm happy to report on the bathymetric study that it is underway. The district has chosen only to look at one reservoir because the staff have basically indicated that the feasibility of actually dredging reservoirs is, it's very expensive to do that work, that you could spend millions and millions of dollars and have only a very modest yield of benefit in terms of capacity in the reservoir. You know, some tens of acre feet. And the business of getting rid of the dredge spoils is a big part of that problem. In addition, the district, basically under its contracts with the state, its permits from the state, has a limited capacity of water that it can hold. So in other words, we can't go beyond that original capacity that was permitted for as part of building a dam. Groundwater, Marin County basically doesn't have groundwater opportunity because of our geological structure. Few very small areas in West Marin where there are some exceptions, but generally it's not an opportunity for Marin County. The Blackwater piece, I wholeheartedly support the project that the district is investigating right now. Basically the time constraint is that we're waiting for a state law that is anticipated in 2016 related to, you know, direct potable reuse of water.
So they're doing it now in Orange County, though.
Okay, let's go on to the next question,
Okay.
just so because I know people are waiting, and just so everybody knows, we're going to be going over a little bit, if that's okay with both of you two. Okay, so Lori, 1 minute question, and then Susan, I haven't forgotten you or Carrie.
I read the draft EIR and also briefly the Marin on Fire of the grand jury report. And the concern about fire in the Marin Water District is very real, but much to my surprise, glyphosate was seen as something that could be a strategy to reduce fire risk. And what I've discovered since 2012 is associating with glyphosate experts who are called all over the world to rescue countries that have used glyphosate, is that it enhances sudden oak death, oak wilt, and scorch diseases. And so I really applaud your no pesticide stance, but I wanted to know if the firm that you hired was aware of this, and there are a variety of other things as well.
Yes, so you're referring to the draft plan. The environmental impact report is underway, and the consultants who are doing the EIR under the oversight of our staff are doing a deep literature search to take into account all of the latest science on herbicides and watershed management. So I do expect that information that you're referring to will come forward in the EIR. And if you have information to offer, we're definitely interested in receiving it. And as I said earlier, I'm very interested in the factual information that will come out of the EIR and the robust community discussion that will happen, I'm sure, around the alternatives.
Thank you. Susan, what do your question? Oh, excuse me.
Let
No,
me-
Susan.
let me-
Sorry,
You know,
sorry.
you know, the district has been studying whether glyphosate is safe for the last 10 years. And for me, if you can't figure out if it's safe after 10 years, it's not safe. And the problem when an agency like the district does that type of study, it tends to internalize the cost and externalize the harm to the community. Because if there is harm to the community, that's not going to be on the books of MMWD. That's going to be on the ratepayer or the customer that gets sick. So it's time to declare the watershed as a pesticide herbicide-free zone. I mean, it is long overdue. We do not need to use these toxins in the watershed. The watershed is a sanctuary. It's a sanctuary for recreation. It's a sanctuary for the health of our community. And it's long overdue to declare it as an herbicide-free zone. As far as fire is concerned, the district has done its best to confuse people to think that herbicides are going to address the fire danger. If you look at the mapping of so-called invasives, of the brooms on the district lands, 80% of the broom is in one zone, zone 5. So you may use herbicides, the majority of the broom that's going to be eliminated by this is in one zone. 90% of the watershed is not going to be affected. You're not going to knock down the fuel load in a 20,000 acre watershed by spraying herbicides in one zone, in zone 5. And by the mapping the district did itself, that bears that out. So it's really somewhat of a flawed reasoning process to equate the use of herbicides with the fire danger. We need to do enhanced watershed stewardship now. We don't need to be studying herbicides for another 10 years. We need to get to work now.
Yeah.
Susan, to your question.
Okay, first have full disclosure, I'm Nevada, so we're NMWD. But as a planning commissioner in Nevada, we had a white paper done on water availability in the last couple of months. So it was put together by staff with help from Chris DeGabriel from our water district. And what I found interesting in the report was, because my concern was growth. How are we going to handle water and the whole perspective was, do we have enough water availability for our general plan build out? And what was very interesting at the end, after lots of questioning, was really the key, was recycled water, continued use and expansion of recycled water, efficiencies in new construction. There was a big root on single-family homes because they're big water wasters. But for immediate problems, the solution was more conservation by the residents of Nevada now. And I'm assuming that's the same for MMWD too. The immediate solution would be more conservation, ask people to cut their water use even more than they're doing now. So can you comment on that?
Sure. Absolutely is the answer. We are aggressively pursuing conservation in the form of the rebate programs I mentioned to you. We have also, as I said, working on a program to help people change out their landscapes, which of course is the highest use of water. And I would remind us though that in this particular year, we are in a dry year, not yet an emergency year. And so there has to be a nexus with reality in terms of mandates. And the district's measure for an emergency year is basically a 25% rationing. It is the responsibility of the cities and the counties as the planning entities to implement the kind of measures you're talking about, whether they're controlling single family or changing out toilets, that kind of thing. So things that are related to building code and building permits, the cities can be responsible for. I certainly wholeheartedly support the idea of a strong relationship between the water district and the cities and the county that are responsible for implementing those building codes. So I think we're already on it in large part, and you support the points you make.
Larry.
I think Ms. Crosse and I both agree that conservation is a priority. But I think where the disagreement is between us is the approach that we need to take. I think the district needs to assert leadership. And not, right now we are actually under state water agency emergency orders to reduce use, I think 20% right now. We're not meeting that yet. We are, if not in a water emergency, we are certainly in water urgency if you look at our water supply holistically, including the Russian River supply up in Sonoma County. So it's not time to rest on our laurels and congratulate ourselves on how well we've done, because we have a lot more to do, and we've got to get there relatively quickly. And I think the district needs to be demonstrating more leadership. It's not enough to be giving rebates. There's got to be aggressive rebates. The district has to be promulgating model ordinances for all the local jurisdictions to increase their building code upgrades so that this becomes part of how we do business. And I think in order to meet those standards, to step up to the next level, we've got to change how we do business at the water district. The district needs to be a leader. It doesn't need to be a preacher. It needs to be a leader. It needs to be getting out there and actually demonstrating to the local jurisdictions what needs to be done. There's a lot of parochial interests that are going to push back against that. You're going to have realtors that don't want you to do change out because it's going to slow down the closing of their sale. We can deal with that. They just dealt with that in Mill Valley on the sewer lateral issue, where they said, okay, we'll give you 30 days after closing to get it done so that we don't delay your closing. But we've got to be innovators. We can't just kind of do business as usual, because we've got a long way to go.
Okay, Carrie, we're going to go to you for the final question. A 1-minute question, please.
Yes. Carrie Stabner, Mill Valley Marin Water Coalition. And like I said, this might be more for you, although I realize that the desalination plant was not a matter that you voted on. But where do you see the proposed San Rafael desalination plant, which I think figures are that it could cost as much as $400 million to build and operate. Where does that fit into MMWD's plans to meet future water demands? I realize it's been backburnered now, but where does it fit in?
The district definitely is not considering desalination anymore, and yet it has not outright said it will never do desal. So that's kind of the short version. You're aware of Measure S, I believe, which requires that if the district is ever considering building a desal plant, that it must be approved by the voters of the district. And I supported that measure strongly. I personally believe that desal is not a good option for Marin, largely because of the high cost of construction, but also the high cost of operating costs. Basically, every year we would have a bill for paying for the operation of a desalination plant, even if we were not using the water. And remember that most years we have plenty of water with the resources that we have already. So I don't think desal is a good option for Marin County. That said, I think a distinguishing point between us is that I would never say never, because we don't know what is coming in the form of climate change. We may be facing a 4 or 5 year drought. We need to not close off any option for that scenario. And additionally, we never know what new technology will bring. But for the moment, I think that desal is not a great option for Marin Municipal Water District.
Larry.
I don't think desal is a good option for Marin Water District. I didn't think it was a good option in 2009 when I joined the lawsuit to stop the district from pursuing it. It's another, it's let's keep the engineers employed type of project, just like the pipeline over the Richmond Bridge. I mean, this is like Army Corps of Engineer thinking. It's like, we have a budget, we're gonna employ the engineers. And to me, that kind of typifies the operating culture at the district. It is misallocating resources. I mean, the resources that are going into these fancy engineering projects and the EIRs that cost millions of dollars are better spent doing things like enhanced watershed stewardship, hiring crews of people at living wage to go out and actually clear the watershed and increase the yield in the watershed, to actually invest in our own communities and build local employment for local people doing the change-outs that we need in new construction, major remodels, and sale of property. 600 houses change hands every year in Ross Valley. each year we can little by little create much more efficiency in this watershed and really be part of the watershed. This watershed can provide us healthy, abundant, local water. And that's what the State Water Board wants us to be doing. And I think my platform really is more in consonance with the State Water Board than the current Water Board plans and EIRs that are now being circulated by this agency. This agency's got to look inward, and I'm not just talking about navel gazing. I'm talking about practical solutions for our community.
That sounds like an early warm-up for your summary statement, but we had agreed that Lisa would go first for her 2-minute summary statement, and then we'll close with your summary statement.
Very good, thank you. First of all, I just want to again say thank you for having me here, and to take a moment to remember that we are all uniquely blessed in the form of this extraordinary watershed that we have in the mountain that provides us not only with a beautiful place to live, but a wonderful water supply. And I want to emphasize that much of the work that Larry is describing is already aggressively underway. It's critically important to know that we are working hard in the watershed already. We've doubled our budget in this year. It's an important area of priority for the district, and we're exploring all of the ecological options as well as the conservation and infrastructure options.
Double the budget on what, please?
On the watershed management this year. I would add that I don't think it's enough. I think we need to keep going, but it was an important good step in the right direction. So basically, the fundamental point is that it's a very delicate balance, trying to take care of human needs, all of the infrastructure that brings the water to you every day, while also sustaining the watershed and its ecological values. And I believe that my experience has prepared me well to strike that balance. With that, I would just simply say that I feel very well prepared for the work to come. I'm fully committed to the job, have been and will continue to be for another 4 years. And I want to express my appreciation for the support of all of the people in the community who have stepped up for me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've got 2 minutes for a summary statement.
Okay. It's time to change the way we do business in the water district here in Marin. We're facing challenges of drought, climate change, state housing mandates, economic growth, community health. And we do indeed have a unique opportunity with our watershed. We actually have the possibility and an asset to provide us with a resilient and sustainable source of healthy water. That is what we need to be looking at improving. The district's got to turn its focus from heavy engineering to heavy conservation, heavy efficiency. It's got to go from heavy construction to innovation and efficiency. That's where the future is. And I think it's time that the district, it needs new leadership. I mean, I've got 11 years local government experience in Fairfax, which has been a pretty trend-setting jurisdiction. We were the first jurisdiction that banned pesticides in our commons. We were the first jurisdiction that took on polystyrene containers. We took on the plastic bag industry. We took on PG&E when they wanted to saddle us with these smart meters. So we've taken stands. Those type of stands are what leadership is about. It's about going outside your comfort zone. And I don't think going outside your comfort zone is going to lead us to changing our lifestyle. It's going to be changing how we do things to maintain the lifestyle and prosperity that Marin County is used to and that Marin County will have going forward. And we can do that, but it's just going to take some new leadership at this district.
So Lisa, Larry, thank you so much for joining us.